Hey guys, you're with Restorative Rach, and we are doing our very first sit down chat about menstrual health topics. If you are not aware, I'm a menstrual health coach. I was certified through the Institute of Menstrual Health to become a coach to help women become educated and aware of their cycles and to address period pain naturally. And I wanted to come away from Instagram a little bit and move toward a more genuine, soft, long-form content platform. That was a mouthful. And I feel like a podcast / YouTube is the perfect way to go about this. And I felt a confirmation that this was right today while I was preparing for it. I've been busy planning this out, and the excitement for my business came back to me while I was planning this, so I know it's the right choice. Because how hard can it be to sit and chat about my favorite topics for 20, 30, 40 minutes? So thanks for coming to join me today. I hope you enjoy. Now, I love the idea of doing podcasts, but to be quite honest, I have severe ADHD, and talking about one topic for 20 minutes straight is very challenging for me. So I hope you know that this podcast will be everywhere, and that's just the style. But I am hoping to provide valuable education, hopefully that you can apply to your own life in the form of sharing my own experiences. And with that, let's start our very first chat about ovulation. Specifically, how I feel that I've mastered the art of tracking ovulation effortlessly in a way that does not disrupt my life. If you're hearing puppy squeaks in the background, it's because there are 10 puppies in this house. They are 4 weeks old. That's one of the many side hustles that I am currently on. I am helping a friend raise puppies, and let me show you one of them. Say hi. When I first started tracking ovulation, let's go back before I started tracking ovulation. I had no clue that it was even possible to track ovulation. I barely even knew what ovulation meant. This was my whole life up until I had my experience with getting on birth control right before I got married at age 20. And I was on the Nexplanon. It was an arm insert. It is a very intense form of birth control. It's like a high dose of hormones. I had a very terrible experience while on that form of birth control, but at the time I thought there is no other way to fully prevent pregnancy. And that's what I had been brainwashed to believe. I don't even know by who, because my mom didn't even use birth control. Like, I didn't really have friends that used birth control, like just society in general. And I was so anxious, depressed, generally unwell. I could never be satiated. I was hungry. I gained weight. I was bleeding for months at a time. I had some other symptoms, but those are my main ones. And eventually it got to the point where I was like, I have to get off of this. And what are my options? I was terrified of getting a copper IUD. I had heard horror stories of the pain. I know it works for some people, but I was just scared. And then I knew I couldn't be on a hormonal form, so my next choice was the fertility awareness method, which, after asking around, or I guess like telling around the people that I was close with, I became filled with fear that I would mess up and get pregnant. And I think that's kind of the norm for women who are heading in that direction, to receive some pushback, especially if you're young and not ready for children. I think the reason that's a norm is because literally doctors will tell you that. If you go to the doctor's office, it's like not a substantial form of birth control to them. I remember telling the nurse when she was taking out my Nexplanon that I was going to use the fertility awareness method, and she was like, well, good luck with that, basically. And that was very scary for me. But I pushed through and decided I would just try it, and we would use a lot of condoms if we had to, because condoms have a great efficacy rate. And so that's what we did for the first little while. And then once I was confident, knowing that I had ovulated based on basal body temperature, I wanted a little more information. So let me backtrack. I focused on just basal body temperature for the first year of tracking ovulation, and I did that by buying the Daisy device. It's an oral thermometer, and it also has an algorithm within the device and on the app that tells you your fertile days. And what I liked about it is it gave me a green light, a red light, or a yellow light. And a green light was safe days, and a red light was fertile days. So it was like green light, yes, unprotected, red light, no. So that was easy for me, and I did that, but I still felt like I was very reliant on the app and the algorithm to tell me when my green days were, based on my temperature rise. And if you aren't aware, you can use basal body temperature to gauge whether you have already ovulated. So what happens is your corpus luteum releases the egg, and what's left behind is a little sac that produces progesterone, and progesterone has a thermogenic effect on your body. It raises your body temperature by 0.4 to 1 degree usually, and you can see that if you're taking your temperature consistently around the same time each day without variables such as lack of sleep, medications, alcohol, things like that. Anywho, I was very reliant on the Daisy app for a long time, and I would take my Daisy with me everywhere. I would take it with me camping, and if it had a hard time telling me my fertile days, then we had to use a lot more condoms that month. And it came to a point where I was like, this is getting a little bit tiring to have to worry about taking my temperature at the same time every single day. And I wanted to dig a little deeper. That's when I started paying attention to cervical mucus, and that was the first thing that changed everything for my confidence and ease in tracking ovulation. Before I focused so much on cervical mucus, I would notice it but I wasn't studying the difference in consistency and what that meant for my fertility. And if you're not aware, the reason this is such a vital factor in knowing your fertile days is because your body is creating a substance in which sperm can travel through, and it literally can't travel up to your egg if there is no substance to travel through. Like, it can't just travel up your dry cervix and up your dry uterine wall. Basically, it needs a river to flow through. And so when I see an influx of stretchy, watery, wet cervical mucus, I know that my body is trying to create a pathway for sperm to travel through. And that's kind of the big rule that I go by when I'm wanting to know when I'm ovulating. The second thing that I realized after a year was that I have ovulation pain. It's technically called Mittelschmerz, but it's just a pain in my lower right or lower left abdomen on the day that either the day before or the day of ovulation for me. And that's a huge thing that's helped me. But obviously that's not something that everyone can go off of. Some people don't have that. But I will say that's a big help for me. The next thing that helped me was getting a wearable device. I know that this is kind of a trendy topic right now, and I am not talking about this to present a sponsored device, but I bought the thermometer ring. This is the ring. Let's see if it'll focus. It's a very lower end ring. I actually didn't buy it until after the rise and insurgence of wearable fertility devices already happened. Like, so many of my friends had Oura rings. They used the Natural Cycles app with their Oura rings. And I was like, not about it for a while, because I was an OG oral thermometer kind of girl. I was like, you just got to do it the hard way. But at some point, I changed my mind and was like, I'm just going to try a wearable and see how it changes my life. And it did drastically give me ease of life in tracking ovulation, because I can wear it to bed and it'll take my average temperature throughout the night, and then I can wake up and it has my data. Whereas with an oral thermometer, you have to take it at the same time every day. Like I said, I use the thermometer ring and I use the thermometer app, and it does have an algorithm similar to Natural Cycles, which tells me when my fertile days are. But I rarely rely on that because I'm so confident in my own judgment. The wearable game, I hate to say it, but it is a hack for tracking ovulation consistently and accurately. And part of the reason that I was avoiding getting a wearable is because they're so dang expensive. I mean, over $300 for a ring that just tracks some cool things about my body is just so silly to me. So I bought the thermometer ring with like a discount code, and it was under $150, more than half the price of the other rings, and that gave me the power to, honestly, because I wasn't putting so much effort into taking my temperature daily orally, I then was able to track my cervical mucus more intimately. The third thing that made me really confident in my own judgment of ovulation timing was tracking my hormones for a month straight and multiple other months around ovulation. I personally have used the Mira device. This is a hormonal tracker, like a laboratory device. You pee on a stick and you put it in the machine, and it tells you your levels of estrogen, progesterone, and LH and FSH. But the main thing I wanted to see was if LH would rise before I thought I was ovulating, and if progesterone was rising after I ovulated, because those are two very important biomarkers. And I used that information to confirm that my temperature was rising at the right time. My cervical mucus and my middle schmerz were all happening. Everything was working together to tell me that I was about to ovulate and that I had ovulated. And so once I confirmed that, I don't think that it's reasonable to be tracking your hormones all the time just to simply know if you're ovulating. But to do that once or twice or 3 cycles is very eye-opening, and it's also helpful in confirming that your other signs of ovulation are correct. So those are the 3 things. I really focused on cervical mucus. I started using a wearable device for basal body temperature, and I tracked my hormone rises. Obviously, you don't need a hormone device. Mira is obviously pricey. You can get really cheap LH strips at Walmart, and you can just test on those every day around ovulation. That can be really helpful for knowing that you are about to ovulate, because our LH levels rise just before we ovulate. And so that can help us know we're about to ovulate. Temperature tells us that we did ovulate, and cervical mucus tells us that we are about to and are ovulating. So those are the 3 things that helped me to go from feeling like it was homework to just feeling more intuitive about when I was ovulating, because once I could confirm, yes, this is what I feel like, this is what my cervical mucus is like, this is what my temperature is doing, these are what my hormones are doing while I'm ovulating, that gave me such confidence in seeing the patterns every month and being able to recognize that. And so now at this point, I just feel very intuitive. I feel like I can even feel the shifts in not only my cervical mucus and my body, but even my mind and my energy, and nothing crazy, but just I can feel when ovulation is coming on, and it's honestly really cool. Younger me would be so impressed with how intuitive I am with my own personal body. So I genuinely think that every woman that desires to know her body and know her cycle deserves to track ovulation with ease and also effectiveness. And I think it's a superpower in a million other ways. I should do a whole nother episode on that, but I definitely think knowing when you're ovulating is a superpower in being able to plan your cycle around it, planning your life, like trips or work projects around your bleed, being able to conceive, being able to avoid, and being in tune with that vital, complex system in your body that drives all of your hormonal changes. I know that for some people, these concepts may be a little bit confusing, especially when we talk about LH, progesterone, basal body temperature, things like that. But rest assured, I do have a course that teaches all about this in depth. I also have a $15 masterclass if you want to learn like the science behind what I've explained today. I do share all about that in the masterclass, so feel free to check that out. And that would be like a perfect starter for fertility awareness method if that's something that you are shifting toward or wanting to dive deeper into. But anyway, I hope that this has been helpful for you. That's the goal, and we'll see you guys later.